So I guess, is there any other opens before we jump into that, the GitHub services conversation?
I have one on PyTools in your CI settings.py file. Where's the best location for the detailed documentation for each method in CI settings.py?
There's some documentation in PyTools. So PyTools, each of the two repos has a docs folder. I would think you'd be wanting PyTools extensions. That's the best place we have. And I guess if there's something missing, please open an issue and we'll try to get it resolved.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking for like the PyDocs level documentation for the parameters and return values and the set of methods that you are supposed to implement for CI settings and the definition of those things. Like for example, the definition of workspace and packages path. I don't think it's exactly aligned with the EDK2 definition of those, and I just wanted to see the detailed definition from PyTools perspective.
That's fair. Yeah, let's get an issue open and we can get some attention on that. I can probably share a couple links that would at least describe the parameters. But you're probably right in that we don't have comprehensive docs for those.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, and if we have to open up issues and get some docs filled out, that's great. We'll work on it together.
All right, can you guys see the screen?
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
So like I mentioned, Michael Kavaki and I have been talking internally. Mike Kenny and I have been talking for years. You know, we've had that long-running conversation around starting to move our code reviews into GitHub. And I think as we looked at that, and we had a couple weeks ago, we had a great talk around some of the policies that we might want to put in place, you know, and you have to rethink kind of the development process and then how that connects to Bugzilla and how that connects to all the other things. I think that made me want to start to put together some idea of could we move Tianocore forward into using GitHub services for more things. And I think the main point, right, is really to make this process easier and more streamlined, right? I think we've talked over the years, you know, there's definitely some great advantages to running, you know, custom servers with your own version of things where you can customize them more. But there's a lot of downsides to that. And I think in the Tianocore project, I think my opinion is we're already suffering a little bit from, you know, lack of engagement, lack of people getting involved. And so I think we want to take advantage of these services that make this easier and make the experience more intuitive for people that are familiar with GitHub. You know, we've talked over the years around how do we make sure this is asynchronous, right? The email system works well to be asynchronous. Obviously, meetings, we get pretty limited attendance, although I appreciate everyone showing up today. But I think the GitHub process is very asynchronous, and the online tools that they provide bring a lot of visibility to those important things. You know, we're looking at this from a way to how do we minimize the manual processes that go on. One, so that we could, you know, when people need a break, they can be replaced or someone else can fill in for them, and it's not, you know, a completely disjoint and new thing that they have to do. But also, you know, there's a lot of automation that can get rolled into GitHub processes that can kind of help make these things just keep moving forward. There's a lack of, I would argue that there's a pretty big lack of transparency around when things are going to get merged, when a maintainer is going to, you know, finally review something. And I think, again, GitHub and doing it in the online process can kind of bring some visibility to, hey, this PR has been open for 6 months. Like, why isn't it closed? Or this package is not getting maintained very well or very quickly. Like, maybe we need to look at getting some additional help there. Whatever it is, I think bringing some of that stuff off the mailing list and into some tools that make it more visible will make things easier and hopefully, again, smoother. And then again, hopefully this would provide opportunities for more people to get involved. I think this community needs more help. And this project is important in so many places that we just need more people to get involved. And I would hope that leveraging this stuff could make it easier. So those are the goals. I'll stop for a minute and see if anyone has other goals or has any objection to any of those.
Yeah, I just say, like, I know from talking to the open source folks who, have grown up doing the kernel mailing list kind of stuff. When you get into a debate with them, it seems like one of their big things that it breaks down to is just long term, like being able to extract the data and owning the data independent of some like corporate entity seems to be a big deal for them. So not necessarily directly related to the process, but that seems to be something that always gets gummed up with those when we talk to people from that point of view.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. But I do look around and, like, even if we talk about our mailing list, for most practical purposes, I can't find mail that goes back a couple of years when the list switched, right? The online archives are difficult or incomplete now. Like, it just happens that, like, you lose stuff. And so I agree that you want the most important data to be in your Git history. But I don't think that can be the only source.
Yeah, I know, and I, and it's the review comments and everything else too, right? But I just think it's something that's really easy for those of us who work at a bigger company to not think about because the infrastructure is provided for us. It's kind of just it's an assumption that it's just there, right? And we don't worry about its life cycle. It's not something we really think about, like at least like in our internal stuff. So
Yeah.
but it's something they bring up a lot, so it's just good to think about it if we want to have the conversations with people with those kind of people with people who with that perspective. It's just good to have thought about it before you have the conversation.
Yep, that's fair. If you have any thoughts around how to best address that, like, we a few years ago did look at, like, are there good GitHub backup solutions, ways to, like, pull out all that metadata and save it in a way. And there are some things out there. There's things that people have written scripts that just mine that database and pull it. I don't know how useful it is in the end.
Well, yeah, and I think at some point you have to balance if you're going to focus on your efficiency and your productivity moving forward or trying to keep track of a lot of these things in the past. And with a lot of these projects nowadays, it's not that uncommon to be on GitHub. So a lot of projects have moved to GitHub and I believe have solved these problems. They're also important projects. So you can either look at those solutions or you can also say, is it better for this project to be constrained and held back by us being afraid to move to today's modern tool sets, or are we going to focus on trying to build all this infrastructure for our limited and constrained development environment, right? So you can either have a lot of developers and you can scale, or you can have a few developers that have all of their stuff, redundantly saved many times over. But I think at some point it makes sense to kind of focus on what's better for the overall community and moving forward.
Yeah, and to add to Andrew's point, it's not just about the data and preservation of the data. It's really any services an open source project chooses to depend upon. You are then tied to that services policies for use and potentially arbitrary changes to the workflow or policies that may occur in the future, right? So when you deeply integrate into other services, you then it's difficult for you to move away if they do something from a policy or a workflow perspective that's against what you're trying to accomplish in your open source project. And that's a general paranoia, not specifically pointed at GitHub. It's just whenever you tie yourself to some other service, you have to ask those questions and make sure you understand what you're choosing to tie yourself to, and that if you have concerns, those have been captured and you have a backup plan if something happens that is against your kind of guidelines or for your open source project on the policies and workflows that service may change to.
Yeah, the migration away from SourceForge quite a few years ago now was quite a lot of work. I seem to remember like everyone moved away from SourceForge en masse when they went downhill.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail the presentation. Why don't we keep going?
No, that's all good. I agree with you that that's going to be one of our sticking points, and so I think it's great to kind of have a little talk through.
Yeah.
The one thing the last thing I would add. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I will point out, Tianocore's chosen to tie themselves to a number of services today, whether that be GitHub for our repos, a Bugzilla server for our bug tracking, our groups.io for email, which is not our first one. It's like our third or fourth email service provider. We've had to select and adapt over time, right? So this is no different in my mind, is that, as long as we're transparent about the options, the advantages, the disadvantages, and we'll adapt and move or adjust as needed as services change over time.
And yeah, I have noticed that we do currently depend on rather a lot of Microsoft services like Azure and GitHub and stuff. So yeah, this seems to be another step towards that. So it might be a good thing to be using GitHub more since we're using other Microsoft services.
I mean, there's definitely an advantage to having more integration, right? It makes things easier. It definitely limits you as well, but it makes things easier. And I think that's going to be the main point here. All right. This was just trying to pull together a list of the main repositories within EDK2 that we needed to think about and address. I added 3 at the bottom because we were talking about whether issues should only be associated with the repo that they belong in. And in that case, if we wanted to track community-wide issues, would there need to be a repo for it? I think those are still open for discussion.
Yeah, I think there's a few more, but we can fill in the details, Sean, or the complete image.
Yep. Yeah, no, that'd be good. And I think the important thing is to figure out if there's something unique or different about those that we would need to account for, right?
Agreed.
The one I did add though that I thought might be an interesting topic is the docs one, and that I know that the Tianocore site itself doesn't get many updates, and there's kind of a weird split between the GitHub wiki and the Tianocore site. There's a lot of projects that do a lot more now with static site generators that can make things easier and nicer looking, and even code documentation can be automatically published and those kind of things.
And we do have the Tianocore-docs organization that does do that. That's a Gitbook-based Markdown format, and it auto-generates the web and PDF and ebook versions of the documents on every commit for the draft, and it has a release process.
Nice.
Personally,
I was gonna say there's probably about 20 to 30 documents being maintained in that format.
So yeah, personally, I don't much like the GitHub wiki. I find it really unintuitive to navigate. So yeah, I don't know if you might want to choose a third-party wiki or something.
Interesting you say that. I have the same concern. But at the same time, it's weird. You search for something in Google and you can find it faster than you can find the wiki page you're looking for faster than if you're searching in the wiki.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be nice. But as far as hosting all this stuff, it's actually been really nice having it all there, even if it's not perfect. So.
Yeah, I think it's just been sort of, little bits glommed on over time with, and then without a big effort into having a librarian to organize the information. So it is, I also have trouble finding stuff, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the wiki could use a little help. I agree. All right, so let's move on real quick. So roles, we're trying to again think about the different roles that are already in the team, in the community that work here, right? So, I think Leming we talked about has done a lot of the release management, and we're trying to kind of define a little bit more around what that role really means, as if we were using GitHub services. So, what kind of things would they do? And this is where milestones come in. So again, that's some metadata that you have in GitHub that you can start associating issues and PRs against. And so I could imagine a workflow where we create a milestone per stable tag release. And then as you want your PR and issue to get into that milestone or stable tag, the release manager or maintainer would put it into that milestone. And then it's very easy to query all the work that went into a given stable tag, and you can kind of see all that. And that will come into play when we start wanting to auto-generate release notes and kind of help with that process. The next role is some sort of project manager. I think this again is actually probably done by Leming, in that he runs the bug scrub weekly, and this is where you'd be looking to see what bugs have not been triaged at all, or have been triaged as something as unknown or needing feedback, and maybe alerting some people that there's something waiting on them. This also might be the place where you'd start to pull together some metrics based on the issues and the tags, so that you could identify again, where projects or different packages need help, or the things that have been really clogged up or had a problem. Again, trying to track down bugs that haven't been resolved in a long time, or other things. So I think there's some role to that. I don't know exactly if there's other things we'd want to put in that role. But I do think that defining the roles might help us actually find people to fill these roles. An additional role we added here was, as I was talking with Mike the other day around issues and the process there, he was saying that the maintainers are not responsible for triage, which in some ways I think is interesting, and that they should be the experts of that package. So I think that
to be clear, they're not responsible for the bug fix. I think triage or helping identify is it a real bug or not, and is it assigned to the right area? I think they definitely can have a role in that with their expertise, but they're not necessarily responsible for the actual code fix itself. But they do have a responsibility for making sure that the processes we've defined around Tianocore for code contributions and quality and review and things like that are all being followed correctly for the areas that they own.
Okay, so maybe we don't need this. If you wanted to break that out or dedicate a person to be like, hey, you field all the incoming problems for the MDE module package, we could create a role for that. That would be a hard role to want to take, but anyways, if we didn't want to define that as a maintainer role, we could definitely make a role that had that. And then finally, there's the maintainers, right? And I think there we're talking about code reviews for all the PRs, design review for complicated work for the stuff that they own, and then one of the things that I think is not happening as much as I'd like to see is making sure that their package is following all the standards that the community has decided on, and kind of onboarding their package into all the testing that we have available, so that we can kind of lift the quality of all of the code in the project.
So Lemming has joined us today, Sean, so that's great. One note I'll give about the how the bug scrub works today is that typically when we see a bug come in the bug scrub, if it appears to be in a certain package, we make sure that currently that the package maintainers are added to the CC list for that bug. So that's pulling them into the review of that issue. So I think that's in alignment with what you're referring to there as the triage role, and the fact that we do want the package maintainers to be involved in the evaluation of the bugs in the areas that they own.
Okay.
But I guess, my question on that is, like, are the bugs getting assigned to people to get worked on, or are the bugs just sitting there waiting for a volunteer to work on them?
It's a mix. Sometimes the submitter, I think, because of the amount of work we have to do and the limited number of developers that are actually contributing content at this point in time, what typically happens is we expect the submitter of the bug to propose the code change to fix the issue. So that's how the assignments tend to go, but we want to pull in the maintainers to make sure it's a real issue, and that the fix that submitter is proposing seems to be a reasonable approach to fix the issue.
But I think it's fair to add that the bug count is pretty large, and there's a lot of old bugs. So the process today is only as good as your team of people that it's assigned to.
Well, and I've seen in quite a few bugs, people will just add a bug like a Git patch because they don't want to deal with the mailing list. So they basically have a fix. They just upload it to the Bugzilla and then move on, type of a thing.
Okay. All right, moving on. So this one is an area we're trying to figure out. If you've ever contributed to a lot of different open source projects, you'll see that one common tool they use is labels. And that's basically how you tag things. It's how you draw attention to them. You can write all sorts of queries that leverage those labels. You can use those labels to be used by your bots that are your automation that will do things. And so we're trying to kind of pull together a list of the labels that we would use, assuming that PRs and issues are used within GitHub. And so I think, just to go over the main areas to give you some idea of what we're thinking, and again, would love feedback here, either in the meeting or after the meeting. If you have other ideas, I'm sure there's projects that use way more labels. So we're trying to find some middle ground. But the first is kind of identify the area. Again, since these repos have a lot of mixed content, have a lot of packages in them, a lot of different people involved in different areas, but not the whole thing. I think having a label for each area would help to kind of focus the right people there. So there's one idea around doing it per package, so that you could easily see within a what package a problem applies to. There is the idea around kind of a pretty generic, platform or core. Given that we have OVMF and some of the virtual platforms, the emulator, payload package, which I think you'd call that a platform, but maybe not. You kind of have some different ideas, and then obviously you have MDE and MDE module and kind of UEFI CPU, all those ones that are really core to the project. That might be another way to scope people and to focus them. And then the last one would be for triage purposes. If you don't know the area, you'd want to tag there to again draw extra attention to that. On the complexity side, this was a kind of an idea around trying to, one, make it easy for people who wanted to come, do a bug fix or something and get involved. They'd be able to find something that might be easier. And two, also make it clear how big and disruptive a certain change might be. So sometimes we see, a simple change come in and maybe it doesn't even need an issue. It doesn't need a lot of discussion. If it's not a bug fix, maybe it doesn't have an issue. Oh, so one thing to note, labels apply to PRs as well. So you could just put an easy complexity of easy on there. And the expectation is that, this one is just something that doesn't need a ton of discussion and you could just push it on through quickly. A complexity of intermediate might need, an issue opened and have a little bit of discussion around, how to do this, how to do it without, breaking as many things as you could, kind of have some tracked discussion. And then finally, the complexity of advanced, we were looking at that might be equivalent to today when we require an RFC and kind of require a little bit more process around it. It might be a whole set of issues that you're trying to fix. There might be multiple things that are intertwined and you have to do a bigger set of changes. So the complexity tag would kind of bring visibility to that, as well as it might be used to make sure that the right process is followed for each pull request, each issue. The next one is really about downstream integrations and visibility into changes. So this is around impact. So breaking changes was, I literally changed the default value. I changed new functionality or existing functionality, and people are broken. And this change, when integrated, needs to be reviewed by the downstream consumer of it. Security impact could be where there's a security related change. There was some talk maybe last month around getting better use of our versioning in the UI section that contains a version, and maybe putting some rules in place that when a security impact comes through, you have to roll the version of the module that are impacted so that things like SBOM might work better. Spec change, obviously, you would need a spec change. That could be a bigger deal. Minor integration, the thought was, hey, if I have to add a library class to a DSC, that's not a huge deal. But that's not the same as breaking change. It doesn't need the same level of scrutiny as a breaking change, but it obviously will have some impact to those that are doing integrations. And then finally, a non-functional change, updated comments, fixed spelling, whatever it may be, no code changes required. So that one, we really were thinking that when you make the release notes, you could really highlight this, and this would bring some attention to all of those people, probably most of us that are all downstream consumers of this, and help with that integration process. If no questions, I'll go on to the state one real quick. Okay, so state, we're just trying to draw attention to the state of the PR or the issue. And this, I think we'd probably tie this around how we have bots. I think we need to start auto closing things. So when you look at our PR list today, even for EDK2, there's a lot of them that are building up. It's very common for projects to have bots that will auto close those. Sometimes they'll give you 30 days and then they'll warn you that they're about to close it and then close it. So some states around that.
Yeah. Sorry, we did have one that auto closed pull requests, but for some reason it was stopped.
Yeah, the mergify change. Mike, do you remember why there was a good reason, but we did take that off?
Yes, it had to do with a change in the way that Mergify works. Added some more features, and we simplified the Mergify configuration, and that was one of the things that ended up being a better way to manage it. I agree that you do need to manage how you close issues. It was that the main reason was it was the personal builds were auto closed before, and I think we decided that unless when you set the push label for Mergify to actually push it in, it will put it into the closed state, I think. But it's the ones that you submit for without the push label, those will never be auto closed. And we expect the developer that submitted it will manage the open close state. So if they try something and it's like, oh, that failed, I got to go back and work on it some more, I'll close that one and open another one later. Or, oh, it's got some minor issues, I'm going to go keep pushing new changes onto it till it passes. So that's really up to the developer that's submitting to do that. But that's kind of beside the point. I think the key here is, when you start having a large number of labels, what I'm noticing here, some of these are in your different colors, which are great for color coding. Some of them are, pick one and only one. Other ones are pick multiple. And I guess GitHub with their labels don't really let you specify any rules within the GitHub management of labels as far as whether or not it's like different colors and pick one or pick multiple. That's up to you to manage those through your own label management, right?
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah,
you could.
I think some of these I think are intended to be mixed together, for sure.
Right, but state is intended to be it's in one of those, right? Pick one. Same with complexity.
I think complexity for sure is a pick one. I think the state, though, I could imagine something is, need submitter info and is at auto close risk, right? If the submitter never comes back.
Oh, yeah, I meant mixed across the different pieces here, not within one, I guess. That is more, section by section. I think like I put a link to wrestling. I kind of thought of these being used in the way that they kind of use their labels. I mean, they have 432 labels. I don't think we want that that many. But if you look at a lot of their issues, they will mix something from one of these, one of these blocks with each other. So like if you look at a lot of theirs, they'll have like one that says like E/easy or hard. So they're rating the difficulty. Then they'll put down whether it's a bug, and then they'll say A hyphen what area it's in, and then T hyphen compiler, saying what type of issue it is. And so you can look at the labels and you can do a lot of easy filtering based on what you're looking for. Like I'm looking for like a EDM or easy difficulty issue in the compiler or something like that, right? That's kind of how I was imagining these being used myself.
Okay, and then type, again, just trying to let people focus in on what they want. So if you want bugs, feature requests, I think discussions we try to push outside of issues, but that could be an open topic. And then the other one I just added today, as I was looking at automatic dependency management, they add a label of dependency, and it's actually kind of nice to see that, oh, this PR was submitted by a bot, basically telling you that, you have a PyPy dependency or a submodule dependency that's out of date, and you can actually just automatically merge them in if you want, and they're probably require less scrutiny. And then in general, I think this is just a list that grows. I think we'd want to carefully manage it and make it very clear what they're used for and how they should be used. But I think it is a list that grows as you find process improvements and automation that you might want to use. All right, moving on. Just some ideas that, again, we've just been trying to look at some other successful open source projects and see what they have. There is tons and tons of automation. It's amazing how many bots people run now. But here's a couple of the main ones, right? So obviously close old PRs, close old issues that need more information. If someone submitted a bug and you can't get to the bottom of it and they don't ever answer, it's not helping anybody. You can also send notifications to remind them, hey, I need some information before I'm about to close this. You can have timers that tell you, hey, like this bug has been open and you're a maintainer of this package and it's been open for this long and nobody's responded. So we can kind of hopefully kick that triage process to keep it moving. You can look across the issues when they're submitted and try to apply other heuristics, and then finally there's automatic dependency management for those repos. I don't think EDK2, well, actually there's a few dependencies there as well. You can have GitHub actually be tracking all these dependencies for you and then submit PRs for you. I'm sure there's more. Again, I would be great if other people had some that they thought were super important or helpful. feel free to.
On slide 5, where you've got the labels,
Yeah.
you might want to add one more box in there that is just the built-in states of PRs and issues built into GitHub, right? You've got it's got the open and close state there already, right, for everybody.
Yep.
So, because I think it's really, you don't want to duplicate labels for things that GitHub already does.
Right. But so some of this information is already like potentially retrievable without a label. We were trying to kind of not duplicate that, right? That's what you're saying?
Yes, and I'm just suggesting that on this page, maybe in a separate box, just say that the other state information that GitHub already tracks for you without adding even a single label are these things,
Oh,
right?
yeah. That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. And actually, that's a great idea because, again, there's been a couple of labels that I pulled off because I was like, oh, you can already get that by, telling that the issue is closed or it's already in a milestone or whatever, right? You can get that some other way.
It's like the non-obvious ones are, if we have a policy that all conversations must be closed before it can be merged, that's a state you can see that there's open conversations.
Yep. Okay, I will add that here. Yep. All right. So starting to try to work through, some of the proposed workflow that would have for issue tracking. I don't think I really want to necessarily go through this all today. I was going to maybe quickly skip through. I will try to fill this in more. There's different artifacts that help, like GitHub has templates that you can put into the repo. So, and they can be full markdown templates with checkboxes and all sorts of fancy things to kind of make them look better, but also be more usable. And so I think, as a group, we want to figure out what kind of information we want every submitter of a bug to put in. And same with feature request. But I'll try to fill this in more and including a flow chart of kind of the GitHub process. PRs, right? I mean, today we already do PRs, so I think there'd be a few interceptions here where we'd change things, where we'd start putting different policy in place. This is where, as we've already talked about with code reviews, like we'd have policies around maintainers must approve these things. But I think there's also things where you could say before the PR can be completed, it must be in a milestone. That would give the release manager, visibility into the change, and potentially we could put policy there if we're at, hard freeze, obviously, then you couldn't close a PR. Those kind of things could happen. But I think, anyways, I think there's lots of options there. Code review, Mike, I was just going to defer to your discussion that's already out there on EDK2, and hopefully there's still progress being made there. I didn't know if there's anything you wanted to say.
Yes, and actually on the scope of bots, I've got 6 of them now associated with the code review to make sure that our code owners' files and reviewers' files and maintainers' files are in sync, and that all files have a code owner associated with them, and then auto assignment of the code owners is handled by GitHub, and then there's a bot that'll do auto assignment of the reviewers. And I have that functional and have to activate it on the EDK2 code review repo with the full community involved is my one step left. And if that goes well, then I'll actually move the code associated with some of those kind of bot action things into formal repositories within the Tianocore organization instead of my personal area. But that's what's up and running now, and I've tested it pretty well. So I think it's ready for everyone else to stare at as well and get feedback on the actions for the bots.
Sorry, one thing I just noticed with the code owners file, the Alexei Fedorov apparently doesn't exist. So I don't know if that's not really relevant to this discussion, but something I noticed.
There's somebody missing from the maintainers file?
No, the code owners, the github.code owners. When I open it in GitHub, it says unknown owner, make sure at Alexei Fedorov exists and has right access to the repository.
And I'm sorry, and on which link are you looking at for that? Maybe you can email me that, what you're looking
Sure.
at, the link to it.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So last thing, I think basically I'll go over real quick. Release process, and I think that's what drove a lot of the thoughts behind this. Really is trying to make the release process easier and the artifacts of our release better. Over the last few months, we've been talking about tightening down tools def and making it clear what's being tested, making it clear what for each stable tag, what platforms are actually being tested and in what configuration they are. I think there's a lot of things there that aren't visible. I don't know if the whole community knows what gets tested at each stable tag and what config. And I think there's been a lot of noise around, what tool chains are supported and what ones don't even work anymore and all of that. So that is also one thing that kind of drove some of this conversation. And so, I think in the release process, we'd be talking about there's some manual stuff that has to be collected, and that might be it. And then, if we're following this GitHub process and we're using milestones, now you can, again, you create that tag. GitHub is able to create those release notes for you automatically. And then we'd want to be able to figure out how to either create another release note document or append to that, all the different issues and their different tags so that you could see the security incidents, you could see the breaking changes and all of that to make those integration steps easier. And then I noticed that a lot of projects will do highlights where, and even GitHub's automatic thing does some highlights where they highlight new contributors. But it might be great to call out people that are kind of doing some of those things that don't get as much attention, whether that's developing the tests or adding new packages or whatever. So that's the release process stuff. Let's see. That's tied to release processing as well. Bug triage, I was trying to think through what I've seen there. I think there's a lot more work here that's needed.
Hey, Sean?
Yeah.
Could you go back to slide 13?
Yep.
I'm not too familiar with what Tianocore is doing in terms of testing. I know there's some that are being run in the CI, right?
Yeah, so in this meeting series, we've been talking that, we need to probably clean up the tools def. It's kind of been a growing list that never gets cleaned. And so there was an RFC that went out 6 months ago that asking people to sign up to maintain a tool chain that they care about. And that at some point we would send out a note that said, here's the list of tool chains that have a maintainer, and the rest of these are going to be cut from our tools def unless someone steps forward. So at the moment, we don't have a lot of coverage, and I think we need to draw some attention to that. But the hope was that the stable tag then we could put out a document for each tool chain that kind of said, hey, these are the packages that compiled. These were, the platform I was on, the exact versions of the tool chain, just to, again, bring visibility into, what is fully supported and what is maybe like marginally supported based on, lack of.
Sorry, so this is build testing.
So that's the top one. Yeah. The
Okay.
second one down was, and this is where I don't have any visibility. So, maybe Mike, Andrew, other people can bring some visibility here. I don't know what platforms are being tested, and I've never seen, anyone talk at a stable tag of, hey, I tested, and this is the exact configuration I had, and this is, this all passed. I assume some of that happens because I see some bugs that come in during the freeze, but I don't know, and I think it would be great for anyone putting in that kind of effort to actually, document it a little bit and then get credit for the great effort they put in.
Yeah, I think to set expectations appropriately, I think it's absolutely fair to list what platforms that are maintained in the EDK2 repo, being the virtual platforms, and platforms that are in the EDK2 platforms repo that have actually been tested against the stable tag? Yes or no? You know, that's a fair thing because that's all open, all the open content that's there.
I think there's also a task to tag the EDK2 platforms repo, so it's like set in stone at each release.
Yeah, that's yet another topic. Yeah, we've got a lot of to-dos.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We can parking lot this for at the end of the meeting, but for as far as testing goes, like I don't think I've ever seen any defined test plans or anything. Am I mistaken? I just missed those, other than unit testing.
As far as formal test plans being documented and published from Tianocore, you're correct. There's the unit tests that are checked in and the CI checkers that are checked in. Those are the ones that are there, and their documentation is effectively the code that's checked in. Would you agree, Sean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I've seen. But again, I do see comments on the mailing list that indicate other people are running tests, and so I guess my hope was that if people are investing the time, or if we decide that it's valuable, that somebody runs some tests on different architectures and different platforms that are unique, that we could at least have a place to document that they ran these tests and this is what their results were.
Right. So I think that as trying to set expectations for, I think, platforms that are maintained privately by downstream consumers of Tianocore, they may not list the specific platforms that they've tested. I think it's reasonable that as we approach a release, that they are asked to provide feedback. Did they test, yes or no? And did they find any issues, or no issues found, where they're good with the release? I mean, that kind of status information from the downstream consumers of Tianocore that maintain their own platforms that are doing testing is reasonable.
Gotcha. Yeah, maybe we need to step up our game, because we've got a CI that runs OVMF, or at least our flavor, where we're running a few thousand tests and we're not actually reporting any of them to y'all. So yeah, maybe that's on us.
Yeah, I can run some build tests and runtime tests against a few of the ARM platforms that I've like purchased and got. So because I've noticed that certain ARM64 platforms just don't even compile.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. So I don't mean to sidetrack, but is there another forum where you all discuss testing, or a different group? Maybe I should also attend that one. Or is that not the case?
I think for the automation, CI, and other that kind of testing has been this forum. There is, I think every once in a while I've seen some sort of SCT bug scrub or something. So I think there might be something else running some cadence. I don't know.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for explaining.
I think the main point is that if anyone is putting effort into testing, it'd be great to bring visibility to that. So just having a place and an idea that, hey, in the release notes, we will put in whatever testing someone wants to report they've done, I think is a great way to encourage more to do it.
Sammer is in charge of the UEFI test group, or at least he was a few months ago. And they are actively developing tests, but I don't think they have any automated test set up yet.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that they have a plan to. I've somehow fallen off of the mailing list, so I don't attend that meeting anymore.
Yeah, if y'all could sync me up with, I didn't catch the name, but we have a framework that we've developed that maybe could be open source that would be helpful, at least for OVMF testing.
Yeah, it sounds good. And I think you could bring that here if you wanted to bring it up here too. I think, I can say that we've done some as well, and ours is open, but we haven't done a lot of work to bring the OVMF parts of it into Tianocore. So I think it would be great to bring some of that in.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, there was a certain name that was brought up and I didn't catch that one. So if someone could throw that in the chat, that'd be great. think it was,
Sammer.
yeah.
from HP, but I'll find his email and send it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder if there's other sort of test suites that would be like available to run. Because I know like ARM has like server ready tests and things like that that use STTs and other things, and then there's also maybe something equivalent in sort of the Windows world too.
Linux has one as well. I think
And
it's
Linux, some of the
FW.
Linux vendors have things as well, right? So yeah, I guess there's sets of stuff we could look into trying to run.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a replacement for the Intel's LoveOS. What's it? Linux UEFI validation.
I know FWTS is still actively developed.
Yes. But yeah, LoveOS was deprecated, I think, a couple of years ago at least.
Yep. I think the hardest part will be finding a platform that runs EDK2 code as contributed into the repo.
Yeah, I have one of those. I've what's it? The up something?
Up Extreme.
Up Extreme, that's the one.
Yeah, we've got the Up Extreme, and we've got a few OCP boards now, like the Aowanda and a few others, I think, right? And then there's the old Microsoft Mount Olympus, that's upstream too.
And a random Skylake laptop. That Acer one.
Oh, yes, that one too.
Yeah, there's actually a company making laptops that you can put EDK2 code on. It's not Framework Computer. I can't remember the name now, but yeah, they make very open source friendly laptops.
They have all their firmware is open source too. I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
I think System 76 was pretty easy to do, right? They didn't lock it down.
Yeah,
that might be the one I'm thinking of.
They're open, but they don't have a platform port in EDK2. They use core boot and then the UEFI payload.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much all those vendors at this point that I know of anyway.
Oh, there's also MNT. MNT Reform.
Haven't heard of that one.
I'll put the link in the chat.
Really, anyone that doesn't turn on boot guard is pretty usable, I think, to develop something on for basic testing.
So anyways, the main idea was the release process should document anyone who's put forward any testing. And I think give a place for that because, you know, that all would help us all, I think, have more confidence and also know when we have gaps.
Yeah, sorry, one more question. I know the open source is using Coverity. Was wondering if y'all had considered using SonarQube, since you can actually measure cyclomatic complexity and upload code coverage as well, which I think would be complementary to this validation. It's difficult to tell how much you've actually tested sometimes without code coverage.
So we talked about that last week a little bit. I think the Coverity is still something that's being evaluated. Michael Kubaki has been bringing forward CodeQL, which is something GitHub provides, and that we use at Microsoft. It's free and available. And I think any other options out there would be interesting. So maybe we queue that up for next week if you're available, and
sure,
I'd love to see that. Yeah. All right. So the last couple slides here are just some notes. Again, like I said, this was a really just a draft presentation to try to get some feedback and to see main thoughts. But, you know, one of the things we talked about is for those that advanced complexity, I think is what we call them. You know, maybe this is a place where you can create a feature branch, right? This is where you need RFC. GitHub has an idea of projects. Again, if you want to try to bring visibility, you know, one of the things I have problems with in Tianocore is a whole lot of changes come in right at the end because everyone realizes that the stable tag is freezing, and there's not great visibility into when all that's happening. And so GitHub has this idea of projects, which lets you kind of track a whole bunch of issues over time. And so if you had a larger feature that was complex and you wanted to break that down into a couple smaller pieces, you could track that using a project. You know, we don't really make use of feature branches today, but if there was going to be a multi-party on a certain feature, a feature branch might be an option. So anyways, that was just some thoughts around those larger, more advanced features.
One note on the large features. We that's effectively what we use the staging repository for now, is for the development of a large feature that needs more extensive collaboration and testing before being merged into the EDK2 repo.
Yep, that's true. Yep. I put this on here because as Mike and I were talking, we needed to think about migrating bugs from Bugzilla and make sure we didn't lose any information. So I think we played around a little bit with some scripting. I don't think it's going to be a big problem, but this was just to kind of capture that. These are some of the projects we've been looking at. If other people have some great examples, it'd be great to share them here. Python has moved to GitHub. They moved all their issues a couple of months ago. Huge move, like some 50,000 issues. I don't know, some massive number that took them over the weekend. VS Code's there and does a pretty good job of project management and, you know, sharing a roadmap of their very active project through GitHub. Node.js is a huge project there with tons of stuff. And then the Rust programming language does a lot of really neat things with GitHub. They use a lot of bots and a lot of tags or labels, as Michael pointed out. But they actually, one of my favorite references there is they do their RFCs as pull requests as well. And so you basically create an RFC document, put it into a repo, request to merge that, and then once it gets merged, your RFC has been approved, and there's a great online way to view, you know, what are some active discussions and what are things that have already been approved and completed. So that's basically it. Yeah, I don't know how to take it from here. Mike, do you have ideas of should we share this on a discussion? Is there other ways people want to contribute to this? Does this seem like there's some viable things here?
Yeah, I think it's a great start to the discussion. I think as noted during the discussion, even today with this group, there's a lot more things to work on besides just, you know, migrating issues into GitHub. You know, because there's all these other things that there's gaps and holes in some of our processes and tools and tests and things like that and documentation that need to be make sure that I think it'd be good for this forum to capture all those work items. It's not to say that we're responsible for them, but just saying we acknowledge that there's a bunch of different work items that we need help on, and maybe we can get those farmed out to other forums or other groups for some of those items. And then the other one I want to point out is that today Bugzilla is a centralized bug tracking system for all of our code and documents, which covers, as you pointed out, I think on one of your like slide 3, there's a large number of repositories. And if we're going to split that out from a single centralized Bugzilla database into issues within individual repositories, we need to start building that mapping. You know, there's different categories of or tags of bugs inside of Bugzilla, and then which repo, if they have that value, which repo do they get targeted to? So I think figuring out that mapping in a table would help, so that, and then it might also be good to know just, you know, how many bugs are in each one of those repos we're targeting. Because yes, there's a large number of bugs open today in Bugzilla, but it's across like, 30 repositories. So how many, I know EDK2 is the biggest one, probably the one that has the most bugs, but I think a lot of these other ones may be a more manageable set of bugs within each repo.
Okay, sounds good. I'll put that down as more work on that.
Okay, and I don't know, Wilmine, if you're still on, do you have any comments on this?
Mike, yeah, yeah. For this one, that I think that we still need that to involve more people and the package maintainer that to involve that to the for this discussion on on more people that to involve that so now that we also see the situation that is the more and more the new issues are reported, but only few ones that are followed up. That's the that's so lots of the issues are in the in the track system, but no follow up. This is the currently problem, I think. We can assign some people. Some people that may be package maintainer or module owner may can join the may can include this the bug review and may give some give some idea or proposal. But problem here is no one that's no more people that's no more people that to follow up that's to really that's to the follow up to resolve this issue. So but the issue and the new issue and are still as the report. So I think this is the problem.
I think so. I would say that like there needs to be some more discussion around the expectations of maintainers and that role, and make sure that the current maintainers all understand that and agree to that role. I think we've joked about like it might be time to clear out the maintainer list and then see who wants to sign up again. But something along the lines to make sure that the people that we have there want to be there and want to do that role, I think would be important. And I think maybe a transition point, like moving to services like this, would give us that opportunity to reevaluate some of those things. And then my hope is we'd also be able to, using the issues, do more, not that we couldn't do it in Bugzilla, but be able to get more reports that are easy to see those packages that are trending in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's we maybe need more discussion on this topic. Yeah, we can like Xiang say that we can set some expectation and give some role that's for the package maintainer. But I think the package maintainer that's maybe still that's for each package we currently we have 2 or 3 maintainer, okay, and for each module for each module maybe 1 or 2 module owner, but currently module owner the role. Currently we just define the role that is the review, okay, and maybe also have help the patch the merge. But currently that's in fact for another role that is the the resolve the issue. Fix the issue. Okay. So we still need more developer that to contribute in the community.
I mean, one other piece of feedback, I have belief that a simpler, easier process that takes less time will hopefully improve the number of contributors we have and make it easier for those maintainers that we already have. Personally, I find the current process really onerous, and I think the other, since I also work on projects that use the other processes, so much easier and so much less effort goes into the mundane parts. That I think, number one, the code reviews are better because people can see that and comment, and it's just easy. It's easy to track that your comments actually got resolved. And then, you know, the merging process shouldn't even be a job. That should basically be automatic, you know, once the process is complete. So my hope is that that would lead to more people getting involved, easier contributions, and that means more random people can actually submit their fix rather than just throw a patch into an attachment. And I think that would hopefully help as well.
Yep, I completely agree.
Yeah. I think this simplify the process. That will be helpful.
Okay, well, there is a discussion thread in the CI and tools where the meeting is announced. For lack of a better place, we can put comments there if you have feedback. This meeting is recorded and will be put up on GitHub with all the past ones, hopefully by tomorrow. And yeah, I guess we'll bring it up next week, but anyone have comments or thoughts, feel free to put them into that discussion thread and I'll try to include them and try to figure out some ways to actually keep this moving.
And did we actually want to have the CodeQL Coverity static CI kind of or static tool meeting next week?
I think from the CodeQL side, Michael, if you're ready, there was a couple open questions around the workflows with GitHub, right? And I think, I don't know if you've ever reached out to Felix yet, but.
No, that's my timeline will be based on, I guess, whether or not we're going to do it next Monday.
You want to say 2 weeks, and that gives you time to reach out to Felix and try to line that up?
Yeah, I think it'd be good for us to settle what we want to do collectively and then present that. So I think 2 weeks sounds good. And
Okay.
I'll reach out to others as well. I think Felix is just the one I'm aware of. And then Eric, you said you were running some type of static code analysis tool, right? Is a different one than Coverity and CodeQL?
Yeah, we use SonarQube. I think it's free for open source projects. We have to pay for it.
Okay.
But
Super interested in the code coverage because that is a topic we've had, and we all agree that we are flying blind without code coverage.
yeah, we haven't quite figured it out either right now. Just trying to figure out how to use like the profiling library to integrate that. But once we have, we can get the code coverage from the unit test, which is nice, and then you can upload that into SonarQube, and it'll go all in line with your existing issues and code in SonarQube. But getting integration style test code coverage is a challenge. So, yeah. But, sorry, maybe the existing Intel unit test package, does that actually give you code coverage? I can't remember because we have a homespun unit testing package that we use that gives us code coverage using GCov.
Yeah, I think the GCov edition, I don't know if it's in the EDK2 right now, but it's definitely out there in open source, and I think, our project has it as well. Yeah.
Okay.
And we have that Visual Studio one that we identified as well, right, Sean? You were going to help with a developer write-up on how to use them.
Yep. Still on my list.
Yeah, good to have some more discussions on that. So.
All right, I have to.
I'll add you to my static tool discussion then as well.
Sure. I have a coworker who couldn't make it today, but if I send his email, then you can add him in. I don't know what his GitHub email is.
All right, sounds good.
I'll forward it to him. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.